There's a moment captured on camera that tells you everything you need to know about Sean Pappi Brush. It's not him on stage, commanding thousands. It's not him signing million-dollar deals or partying with celebrities. It's him alone, in the final days before everything collapsed, gripping a triangular pendant so tightly his knuckles turned white, like he genuinely believed this piece of metal could protect him from what was coming. This footage was never supposed to exist. Pappi had hired a crew to film what he thought would be his redemption story, a documentary that would control the narrative before the world could judge him. But when federal agents arrested him, the project died instantly. The videographers, left unpaid and abandoned, sold everything they'd captured to his longtime rival, Marcus 50 Stone. And what 50 discovered in that raw footage was more damning than any courtroom testimony. A man who had spent decades destroying everyone who came into his orbit, finally realizing that the walls were closing in. Watch the footage closely, and you'll see it. The way Pappi's eyes dart toward doors. The way his hand unconsciously moves to that pendant every few minutes, rubbing it like a talisman. The way his usual swagger, that untouchable confidence that made him a billionaire, has vanished, replaced by something unsettling. Fear. Real, visceral fear. He knows something the cameras don't capture in words. He knows his time is running out. That pendant he's clutching? It's called a triquetra, an ancient symbol used in occult practices as spiritual protection. 3 interlocking arcs forming a triangle, believed by practitioners to ward off evil and shield the wearer from harm. The fact that Pappi wore this openly, in footage meant for public consumption, tells you how deeply he was entangled in the spiritual underworld. This wasn't just jewelry. This was a lifeline, a desperate attempt to invoke protection from forces he believed were greater than the law. And maybe for a long time it worked. For decades, Pappi moved through the world like a man who couldn't be touched. Scandals broke around him like waves against stone. Allegations surfaced, witnesses came forward, suspicious deaths accumulated, but nothing ever stuck. He'd smile for the cameras, release a statement through expensive lawyers, and within weeks, the story would fade. People whispered, of course. Industry insiders knew. But knowing and proving are 2 very different things. And Pappi had spent his entire career making sure no one could ever prove anything. But here, in this footage, something's different. The mask is slipping. You can see a man who's built his empire on intimidation and manipulation suddenly confronting a reality he can't control. No amount of money can buy his way out. No threats can silence what's coming. No pendant can protect him anymore. My friend said, I can't hit 1,000 subscribers. Let's prove them wrong. Subscribe to Mr. Sammy Stories for entertaining, story-packed videos. The cameras keep rolling as Pappi sits in shadow, his hand wrapped around that symbol, his breathing shallow. He's not the mogul anymore. He's just a man waiting for judgment. And somewhere, deep in those eyes, you can see the truth he's always known but never admitted. The darkness he invited in, the evil he cultivated, the lives he destroyed. It was all leading here. To this room, this moment, this reckoning. The documentary crew had been following Pappi for 3 weeks before the arrest. 3 weeks of carefully staged scenes. Pappi in the studio mentoring young artists. Pappi at charity events shaking hands with community leaders. Pappi at home surrounded by family, projecting the image of a misunderstood philanthropist targeted by vindictive accusers. He wanted the world to see him as the victim. The successful black man being torn down by jealous rivals and opportunistic gold diggers. It was a narrative he'd perfected over the years, and he was betting everything on making it stick one more time. But the raw footage tells a different story. In one scene, filmed late at night in Pappi's Miami mansion, he sits alone in his home theater, scrolling through his phone. The crew had been told to keep filming even during downtime to capture authentic moments. What they captured instead was a man spiraling. Pappi reads something on his screen, a news article, a legal document, a message from his lawyers, and his entire body tenses. His jaw clenches. His hand immediately goes to the triquetra pendant, gripping it so hard you can see the metal pressing into his palm. They don't understand, he mutters to no one in particular. They don't understand the forces at play here. The cameraman, uncertain whether this is part of the documentary or not, keeps recording. Pappi stands up, paces the room, still clutching the pendant. He's talking to himself now, or maybe to whatever entities he believes the pendant connects him to. I've given everything. Everything. And this is how it ends. There's something pathetic about watching a billionaire unravel on camera. But there's something terrifying about it too. Because in that moment, you realize Pappi actually believes he's the victim. After decades of destroying lives, manipulating systems, and evading consequences, he's genuinely convinced that he's the one being wronged. The delusion is complete. The spiritual angle isn't new for those who've followed Pappi's career closely. Industry insiders have whispered about it for years. The strange rituals before album releases, the occult imagery woven into Empire Records branding, the rumors about secret gatherings at his properties where bizarre ceremonies took place. But it was always dismissed as conspiracy theory nonsense, the kind of wild speculation that follows any successful black entertainer. Except the footage proves it wasn't speculation. In another scene, Pappi is in his personal study, surrounded by books on ancient mysticism, Kabbalah, ceremonial magic, and spiritual warfare. The shelves are lined with texts that have nothing to do with music or business. Everything to do with power, control, and protection through supernatural means. He picks up one book, flips through it absently, then sets it down and returns to the pendant. This has protected me for 20 years, he says to someone off camera, possibly his spiritual advisor. 20 years and nothing touched me. Not the lawsuits, not the accusations, not the investigations. Nothing. The advisor's response is inaudible, but Pappi's face darkens. Then why now? Why is it failing now? The silence that follows is deafening. What the footage reveals is that Pappi didn't just believe in these spiritual practices. He built his entire sense of invincibility around them. He genuinely thought he'd made some kind of pact, some arrangement with forces beyond the material world that would keep him untouchable as long as he maintained certain rituals and wore certain symbols. The triquetra wasn't just a necklace. In Pappi's mind, it was the source of his power. And watching it fail him in real time is like watching a man's entire worldview collapse. There's a scene filmed 6 days before the arrest that's particularly chilling. Pappi is hosting a small gathering at his home. Not the wild parties he was famous for, but an intimate dinner with a handful of trusted advisors and artists still loyal to him. The conversation is subdued, everyone aware that the federal investigation is closing in, but pretending everything will work out fine. Pappi barely eats. He drinks, though, glass after glass of expensive cognac, his hand never leaving the pendant for long. At one point, one of the younger artists, a kid who can't be more than 22, tries to lighten the mood with a joke. Pappi doesn't laugh. He doesn't even acknowledge it. He's somewhere else entirely, lost in thoughts the cameras can't access. Then abruptly, he stands up. "You all need to understand something," he says, his voice carrying that edge of desperation. "What's coming, what they're trying to do to me, it's bigger than me. It's spiritual warfare. They want to destroy everything I've built because I represent something they fear." The people at the table exchange uncomfortable glances. No one knows what to say. Pappi continues, getting more animated, more agitated. "I've been protected. For years, I've been protected. But there are forces, dark forces, that want to see me fall. And they're using these lies, these accusations, to manifest their will." It's textbook narcissistic deflection dressed up in spiritual language. Pappi has convinced himself that he's not being held accountable for his actions. He's being attacked by cosmic forces jealous of his success. The cognitive dissonance is staggering. Here's a man who allegedly orchestrated murders, trapped women in abusive relationships, drugged and violated employees, and destroyed countless careers. And he sees himself as the victim of a spiritual conspiracy. One of his advisors tries to redirect the conversation back to legal strategy, but Pappi cuts him off. My friend said, I can't hit 1,000 subscribers. Let's prove them wrong. Subscribe to Mr. Sammy's Stories for entertaining, story-packed videos. The lawyers don't understand. This isn't about evidence or testimony. This is about power, and I still have power. He touches the pendant again, as if drawing strength from it. As long as I have this, as long as I maintain the rituals, I'm protected. They can't touch me. The irony, of course, is that within a week, federal agents would touch him. They'd put him in handcuffs, perp walk him in front of cameras, and strip away every ounce of the power he thought was supernatural. The pendant didn't save him. The rituals didn't work. Whatever protection he believed he had evaporated the moment the evidence became overwhelming. But in this footage, he still believes. And that belief, that delusional certainty, makes the footage even more disturbing. The documentary crew captured something else too, the isolation. As the investigation intensified, people started distancing themselves from Pappi. Phone calls went unreturned. Meetings got canceled. Artists who'd publicly defended him suddenly had scheduling conflicts. The mansion that was once filled with hangers-on and sycophants became eerily quiet. In one scene, Pappi scrolls through his contacts, calling person after person. Most don't answer. The ones who do give him excuses. They're traveling, they're in the studio, they'll call him back later. They never do. You can see the realization dawning on his face. He's alone. All those relationships he thought were genuine were transactional. And now that the transaction is over, now that he can't offer opportunity or protection anymore, everyone's gone. Except the pendant. He still has the pendant. There's a particularly disturbing moment filmed at 3 a.m. The crew had left for the night, but one camera was still running, mounted in the corner of Pappi's bedroom for B-roll footage. What it captured was Pappi, unable to sleep, sitting on the edge of his bed in the dark, holding the pendant in both hands now, rocking slightly back and forth. He's praying, or chanting. It's hard to tell. The audio is faint, but you can make out fragments. Protect your servant. Shield me from enemies. Let no weapon formed against me prosper. It goes on for nearly 20 minutes. A grown man, a billionaire, reduced to begging invisible forces for salvation. It's pitiful. It's terrifying. And it's exactly what he deserves. Because here's the truth that Pappi never grasped. The pendant didn't protect him for 20 years. Money did. Power did. Fear did. He built a machine designed to insulate him from consequences. Lawyers who made problems disappear, media outlets he controlled through advertising dollars and access, victims he silenced through intimidation and non-disclosure agreements, a network of accomplices who benefited from keeping him powerful. That machine worked for decades, but it was never magic. It was just money and fear. And when the evidence became too overwhelming, when the victims became too numerous, when the federal government decided they had enough to move forward, the machine broke down. No amount of occult symbolism could stop it. The footage ends 3 days before the arrest. The crew was supposed to return the next morning, but Pappi called them and canceled. He didn't give a reason. Looking back, it's likely his lawyers warned him that an arrest was imminent and that having cameras around would be a liability. The last image captured is Pappi standing at his window, looking out over Miami, the city he'd dominated for so long. The pendant hangs from his neck, catching the morning light. His reflection in the glass shows a man who's already lost, even if he doesn't know it yet. 3 days later, federal agents would storm that same mansion. They'd find Pappi in almost the same spot, wearing the same pendant, still believing he was untouchable. He wasn't. The mask didn't just slip in that footage. It shattered completely. And what was revealed underneath wasn't a misunderstood genius or a victim of circumstance. It was a monster, a man so convinced of his own invincibility, so deluded by power and spiritual nonsense that he genuinely believed he could hurt people forever and never face consequences. For 30 years, he was right. But every shield eventually breaks. Every illusion eventually fades. Every monster eventually gets exposed. And for Sean Pappi Brush, that exposure started with a pendant, a camera, and the desperate belief that magic could save him from justice. It couldn't. But the darkness didn't begin with that pendant. It didn't start with leaked footage or federal investigations. The truth is, Pappi had been leaving bodies in his wake for decades. The pattern was always the same. Chaos erupts, lies are destroyed, and somehow Pappi walks away clean while everyone else pays the price. The first massacre happened in 2001 at a charity basketball game Pappi organized to boost his public image. He hyped the event relentlessly, promised celebrity appearances, free merchandise, once-in-a-lifetime experiences. Radio ads blanketed the city. Social media posts teased the biggest event of the year. Billboards showed Pappi's face with the words, "Come celebrate with Pappi." Free entry for the first 1,000 fans. Thousands showed up, far more than the venue could hold. The gymnasium was rated for a maximum capacity of 2,800 people. By 6 p.m., over 5,000 had crammed inside, with another 3,000 pushing at the doors trying to get in. The security team, understaffed and underprepared, tried to control the surge, but it was hopeless. Pappi had promised the world, and the world had shown up. Inside, the temperature climbed. Bodies pressed together. People started complaining they couldn't breathe. Parents lifted children onto their shoulders to keep them from being crushed. The security team radioed for backup, for someone to stop letting people in, for someone to make the call, to cancel the event before disaster struck. That call never came. Pappi was backstage, getting ready for his grand entrance. When security tried to warn him about the dangerous overcrowding, he waved them off. "The people came to see me," he reportedly said. "We're not canceling. Make it work." So they tried. But you can't make physics work differently. You can't compress 5,000 people into a space designed for 2,800 without consequences. At 6:47 p.m., someone near the back of the gymnasium fainted. People around them tried to help, tried to give them space, and the movement created a ripple effect. Bodies shifted. Someone fell. Then another. Then 10 more. The crowd, packed so tightly that individual movement was impossible, began to surge like a wave. People screamed, tried to push back, but there was nowhere to go. The surge became a stampede. For 8 minutes, 8 eternal minutes, people were trampled, crushed, suffocated. Parents lost grip of their children. Teenagers were pressed against walls so hard their ribs cracked. An elderly woman was pushed to the ground and disappeared under hundreds of feet. By the time security finally managed to stop the surge and get the doors open, 9 people were dead. 23 more were hospitalized with serious injuries. Dozens more had minor injuries they never reported because they were too traumatized to deal with the bureaucracy. 9 people dead at a charity basketball game. Pappi's response? He disappeared. While paramedics worked frantically to save lives, while families screamed for missing loved ones, while news crews captured the carnage, Pappi slipped out of back in trance and vanished. No statement, no apology, no acknowledgement that this was his event, his responsibility, his fault. His lawyers released a statement 3 days later. Mr. Brush is deeply saddened by the tragic events that occurred at the charity basketball event. His thoughts and prayers are with the families affected. However, Mr. Brush bears no responsibility for this unfortunate accident, which was caused by unforeseen overcrowding despite adequate security measures. Every word was a lie. The event wasn't adequately secured. The overcrowding wasn't unforeseen. Security had warned Pappi directly. And calling it an accident was obscene. This was negligence. Criminal negligence. Pappi had prioritized his ego over people's safety, and 9 people died because of it. But here's where it gets even darker. While families were planning funerals, Pappi was planning something else: asset protection. Within 72 hours of the tragedy, Empire Records, Pappi's flagship company and primary source of wealth, was quietly transferred into his mother's name and his childhood best friend's name. Corporate documents were filed late on a Friday afternoon, buried in bureaucratic paperwork that would take months for anyone to notice. Why? Because Pappi knew the lawsuits were coming. He knew families would sue him for wrongful death, for negligence, for organizing an event that killed their loved ones. And he wanted to make sure they couldn't touch his money. The lawsuits did come. 7 different families filed claims seeking millions in damages. But when they tried to go after Pappi's assets, they hit a wall. Empire Records wasn't in his name anymore. His personal wealth was hidden behind shell corporations and offshore accounts. His mansion was in a trust. His cars were leased through dummy companies. The family's lawyers fought for 2 years, but the legal maze Pappi had constructed was too complex, too expensive to navigate. Most of the families couldn't afford to keep fighting. They settled for pittances, $50,000 here, $100,000 there, amounts that wouldn't even cover their legal fees, let alone compensate for a life lost. Pappi paid nothing, admitted nothing, learned nothing, and the world moved on. But the people who were there remember. They remember watching Pappi's face on the jumbotron inside that gymnasium, smiling, hyping up the crowd, completely oblivious to, or more likely, completely indifferent to, the fact that people were dying while he performed. They remember how he never visited the hospitals, never attended a funeral, never publicly acknowledged the names of the 9 people who died because he wanted to look like a king. Their names, since Pappi never bothered to say them: Marcus Johnson, 19; Shanice Williams, 23; David Chun, 17; Patricia Okoye, 45; Carlos Martinez, 16; Jasmine Brooks, 21; Kenneth White, 38; Latoya Henderson, 29; DeAndre Phillips, 14. 9 people. Real people with families and dreams and futures. Reduced to a footnote in Pappi's rise to power. And that casual disregard for human life? It wasn't an aberration. It was a pattern. There's footage, not from the documentary, but from old interviews and behind-the-scenes material that shows exactly how Pappi viewed his fans. In one particular clip from 2003, Pappi is in New York doing a promotional event for a new album. He spends about 20 minutes on the street, taking photos with fans, signing autographs, hugging people who tell him his music changed their lives. The cameras love it. Pappi looks generous, humble, connected to the people. But when he gets back in his SUV, when he thinks the cameras are off, except one is still rolling in the back seat, his entire demeanor changes. He pulls out hand sanitizer and scrubs his hands aggressively. Then he looks at his security guard and says, word for word, "Man, I feel disgusting. I need to go home and take a bath in boiling water and peroxide. These people are filthy." His security guard laughs uncomfortably. Pappi continues, "I swear, if I didn't need them to buy albums, I wouldn't touch any of them. You see how they grab at me? Like I'm supposed to be grateful they exist." The contempt in his voice is stunning. These are the people who made him rich. The people who bought his music, attended his concerts, defended him online when critics came after him. And he saw them as dirty peasants he had to tolerate for business purposes. That footage never aired publicly during his peak. It only surfaced recently as part of the documentary evidence. But it confirms what people around Pappi always knew. He didn't love his fans. He used them. He needed their money and their worship, but he felt nothing but disgust for them as human beings. The same disgust he felt for everyone who wasn't useful to him. Which brings us to Devin "Too Dark" Williams. Devin was everything Pappi wanted to be, but couldn't. Raw talent, authentic street credibility, genuine love from the culture. When Devin exploded onto the scene in the mid-90s, he didn't just make music. He became the voice of a generation. Poets studied his lyrics. Activists quoted him. Kids in the hood and kids in the suburbs equally revered him. And Pappi hated him for it. Their rivalry played out publicly. Diss tracks, interview jabs, tension at award shows. The media ate it up, portraying it as competitive fire between two giants. But people close to the situation say it was never competition for Pappi. It was envy. Soul deep, consuming envy. Because Pappi had something Devin would never have. Business acumen, strategic thinking, the ability to build an empire. But Devin had something Pappi would never have. Respect. Real respect. The kind you can't buy or manipulate or manufacture. And that drove Pappi insane. The beef intensified in 1996. Devin released a track that, while not naming Pappi directly, clearly referenced him. The lyrics talked about fake moguls who smile in your face while plotting your replacement, and businessmen with no soul trying to buy what they can't create. It went viral. Everyone knew who Devin was talking about. And Pappi, for once, couldn't control the narrative. According to testimony that would emerge years later, specifically from Keith Davis, a known associate with connections to street crews, that's when Pappi allegedly made the call that would end Devin's life. Keith claims that Pappi reached out through intermediaries and put a bounty on Devin's head. $1 million. $500,000 for Devin. $500,000 for Samuel Suge Barron, Devin's manager and protector. At first, Keith says people didn't take it seriously. Rappers talk tough all the time. But then the money started moving. A $500,000 payment showed up in an account belonging to a known middleman. Someone who'd facilitated transactions between the entertainment world and the streets before. The message was clear. Pappi was serious. On September 7th, 1996, Devin attended a boxing match in Las Vegas. After the fight, Devin and his crew spotted Orlando Harris, a known affiliate of a rival crew, in the casino. Words were exchanged, then punches. The whole thing was caught on casino security cameras. Devin and his crew jumping Harris, beating him badly, then leaving him on the floor. Harris was humiliated, hurt, angry, and he had friends who were very interested in that $1 million bounty. That night, Keith Davis, Orlando Harris, and two others went looking for Devin. They found him around 11:15 p.m., stopped at a red light on Flamingo Road. A white Cadillac pulled up alongside Devin's black BMW. Someone in the Cadillac opened fire. 13 shots. 4 hit Devin. He died at the hospital 90 minutes later. He was 25 years old. The investigation went nowhere for years. Too many conflicting stories, too many people afraid to talk, too much chaos surrounding the case. But decades later, Keith Davis started talking. In recorded police interrogations, in interviews, in a book he wrote, he laid it all out. Pappi wanted Devin dead. Pappi put up the money, and they killed Devin hoping to collect. The detective who investigated the case confirms that shortly after Devin's death, Pappi made a $500,000 payment to the middleman. The middleman was supposed to pass it to Keith and his crew. Instead, the middleman kept it, vanishing with the money and leaving the shooters unpaid. But the intent was clear. The payment was made. Devin was dead, and Pappi's biggest rival was gone. Did Pappi pull the trigger? No. Did he plan the shooting? No. But did he create the conditions that led to Devin's murder? Did he put money on someone's head, knowing exactly what that meant? According to multiple sources, including recorded testimony, yes. And did Pappi ever face charges? Ever get questioned? Ever even get publicly connected to it during his peak? No. He attended Devin's funeral, gave a tearful speech about how tragic it was to lose such a talent, posted photos of them together from years earlier with captions about brotherhood and love, all while allegedly being the man who paid for his death. The pattern was set. Create chaos. Let others handle the violence. Collect the benefits. Accept no blame. 2 years later, Pappi would run the same play again. December 27th, 1999. Club Elegance in Manhattan. Pappi is there with his then-girlfriend, pop star Jennifer Lopez, celebrating the holidays. The club is packed, celebrities, industry people, hangers-on trying to get close to power. Around 2:30 a.m., an argument breaks out. Someone, accounts vary on who started it, throws a drink. Words are exchanged. And then, suddenly, gunshots. Chaos. Screaming. Bodies hitting the floor. When it's over, 3 people are wounded. Bullet fragments in arms, shoulders, faces. Miraculously, no one dies, but it's close. The police arrive. Witnesses point to Pappi's section. Security camera footage shows someone from Pappi's crew, possibly Pappi himself, with a gun. The evidence is strong enough that multiple people are arrested that night, including Pappi and his young protege, Sean Glimmer Matthews. Glimmer was 21 years old, a rising star signed to Empire Records. Talented, loyal, naive enough to believe that Pappi would protect him because that's what mentors do. He was wrong. What happened next is one of the most calculating betrayals in the history of the music industry. Pappi hired the best lawyers money could buy, a team of high-powered attorneys known for getting celebrities off. But here's the thing. He didn't hire them to defend everyone. He hired them to defend him specifically, and he instructed them to do whatever necessary to make sure he walked away clean, even if it meant sacrificing Glimmer. The lawyers met with Glimmer privately. They told him they had a strategy. They told him that if he claimed self-defense, the jury would understand. They told him it was the best way to protect everyone, including Pappi. What they didn't tell him, what Glimmer wouldn't realize until it was too late, was that self-defense only works if your possession of the gun was legal in the first place. And in New York City, gun laws are some of the strictest in the country. You can't carry a firearm without a permit, which is nearly impossible to get. And if you discharge a weapon, legal or not, you're facing serious time. By admitting to firing the gun in self-defense, Glimmer confessed to possession and discharge of an illegal firearm. The self-defense claim was irrelevant. He'd admitted to the crime. The lawyers knew this. Pappi knew this. But Glimmer, young and trusting and terrified, didn't understand until he was already sentenced. 10 years. Glimmer got 10 years in prison. Pappi got acquitted. The jury, seeing a parade of character witnesses and expensive legal maneuvering, decided there wasn't enough evidence to convict him. He walked out of that courtroom a free man, returned to his mansion, and continued building his empire. Glimmer went to prison. He served 9 years before being released on good behavior. When he got out, his career was destroyed. The industry had moved on. Empire Records dropped him. Pappi never reached out, never offered support, never acknowledged that Glimmer had taken a bullet, metaphorically and legally, for him. In interviews years later, Glimmer would say, "I thought we were brothers. I thought he had my back. I didn't realize until I was in that cell that I was just another pawn. He sacrificed me to save himself, and he never lost a minute of sleep over it." But even that wasn't Pappi's worst betrayal. That distinction belongs to what he allegedly did to Big Chris. Big Chris was Pappi's first real star, the artist who put Empire Records on the map, the voice that made Pappi relevant in the music industry. Without Big Chris, Pappi would have been just another wannabe mogul with money, but no credibility. But here's the thing about Big Chris. He was bigger than Pappi, more talented, more loved, more respected. When people thought about Empire Records, they thought about Big Chris first and Pappi second. And Pappi couldn't stand it. People who worked at Empire Records during that era tell stories about Pappi's jealousy. How he'd sulk when Big Chris got more applause at shows. How he'd change plans if it meant Big Chris got more attention than him. How he'd make comments like, "Remember, I made you. Without me, you're nothing." It was pathological. Big Chris was the golden goose, and Pappi resented him for it. The most telling incident happened when Rolling Stone magazine decided to do a cover story on the rise of Empire Records. The writer spent weeks interviewing everyone: Pappi, Big Chris, other artists, executives. When the draft came back, Rolling Stone wanted Big Chris on the cover. He was the face of the movement, the story's main subject. Pappi went ballistic. He called in favors, threatened to pull advertising, leveraged every relationship he had. And somehow, Exact details remain murky. The cover changed. Instead of Big Chris, it was Pappi. Big Chris was reduced to a secondary feature inside the magazine. When Big Chris found out, he was devastated. This was his moment, his validation, and Pappi had stolen it. Their relationship, already strained, fractured completely. Then came March 1997. 6 months after Devin Too Dark, Williams was murdered in Las Vegas. The hip-hop world was still reeling. Devin and Big Chris had been friends once, before the industry politics and beefs pulled them apart. Devin's death hit Big Chris hard, and it made going to Los Angeles, Devin's home base, incredibly dangerous. Everyone knew this. The West Coast was hostile territory for anyone associated with Empire Records. Fans blamed Pappi and Big Chris for Devin's death, even though nothing was proven. There were open threats. Radio hosts warned Big Chris not to come. Street crews put out word that Big Chris wasn't welcome. It was a death wish to go to L.A., but Pappi insisted. Former Empire Records employees, speaking in the documentary, tell a different story than the one Pappi always claimed. Pappi's version was that Big Chris wanted to go to L.A., that he insisted on making the trip despite the danger, and that Pappi was just supporting his artist's wishes. That's a lie. According to people who were there, it was Pappi who pushed for the L.A. trip. Pappi who said they needed to show they weren't afraid. Pappi who organized appearances and events specifically in Los Angeles despite the warnings. Big Chris reportedly refused at first. He wasn't stupid. He knew the danger. But Pappi kept pushing, kept insisting, kept framing it as Big Chris being scared, being weak, being unwilling to stand up for Empire Records. Finally, Big Chris agreed, and they went to L.A. On March 9th, 1997, after attending an industry party, Big Chris was shot and killed in a drive-by shooting. The black Suburban he was riding and was riddled with bullets. He died almost instantly. He was 24 years old. The murder has never been officially solved. But people in the documentary raise disturbing questions. Why did Pappi insist on the L.A. trip when everyone warned against it? Why did Pappi cancel his own appearances, claiming he was sick, while making sure Big Chris stayed visible in the most dangerous areas? Why did Pappi, who was supposed to be in the car with Big Chris that night, suddenly have a last-minute change of plans? And most damning, why did Pappi, immediately after Big Chris's death, begin the most successful phase of his career, releasing tribute songs, launching his own music career off Big Chris's death, and taking complete control of Big Chris's legacy? Some people call it opportunism. Others call it something darker. What we know for certain is that Big Chris's death benefited Pappi enormously. He was no longer in anyone's shadow. He could position himself as the grieving friend and mentor. He could use Big Chris's name to launch projects and make millions. And according to a former Empire Records executive interviewed in the documentary, Pappi tried to scam Big Chris's estate immediately after his death.
Big Chris had just re-signed with Empire Records weeks before he died, but the contract wasn't fully executed. After his death, his estate would need to sign off on the final documents. Pappi allegedly tried to slip new terms into the contract, terms that heavily favored Empire Records and reduced Big Chris's royalty percentages, and presented them to the grieving family as the original agreement. A junior executive noticed the discrepancy and refused to go along with it. He was fired within a week. The scam may have gone through anyway. Big Chris's family signed something, though they've never publicly discussed the terms. But think about that. Your biggest star, the artist who made you relevant, is murdered. His mother is planning a funeral. His children will grow up without a father. And your first thought is, how can I steal more money from his corpse? That's who Pappi is. 9 people dead at a charity basketball game. Devin Williams dead after a bounty was placed on his head. Glimmer Matthews in prison for a crime Pappi committed. Big Chris dead after being pushed into a deadly situation, then robbed in death. Every crisis, every tragedy, every catastrophe. Pappi walks away clean, richer, more powerful, and everyone else pays the price. My friend said I can't hit 1,000 subscribers. Let's prove them wrong. Subscribe to Mr. Sammy's stories for entertaining, story-packed videos. But the most devastating part of Pappi's story isn't the violence he orchestrated from a distance. It's what he did to the people closest to him, the ones who trusted him, admired him, needed him. The ones he trapped. The ones who survived, but barely. Cassandra Vale was 18 years old when she met Pappi. Just 18. A girl with dreams of becoming a singer, desperate for her shot at stardom in an industry that chews people up and spits them out before they turn 25. She was beautiful, talented, and naive enough to believe that hard work and dedication were enough to make it. Pappi saw her at a showcase event in 2005, one of those cattle call auditions where hundreds of hopefuls perform 30-second snippets of songs, praying someone important notices them. Most don't get noticed. Most go home disappointed, their dreams deferred for another year or abandoned entirely. But Cassandra got noticed. Pappi was in the audience that night, supposedly scouting for new talent. When Cassandra finished her performance, he stood up and applauded. Then he approached her backstage, introduced himself, and said the words every aspiring artist dreams of hearing, "You've got something special. I want to sign you to Empire Records." She was ecstatic. Who wouldn't be? Empire Records was one of the biggest labels in the industry. Pappi was a billionaire mogul with the power to make careers overnight. This was the opportunity of a lifetime. What Cassandra didn't know, what she couldn't have known at 18, was that Pappi wasn't offering her a music career. He was offering her a prison sentence. The grooming started immediately. Pappi positioned himself as a mentor, a father figure, someone who genuinely cared about her success. He paid for her apartment, her car, her clothes. He introduced her to important people. He brought her to studio sessions and industry events, always keeping her close, always making sure she understood that everything she had came from him. And then, gradually, the boundaries shifted. Late-night phone calls that became mandatory. Requests to accompany him to personal events that had nothing to do with music. Comments about her appearance that crossed from professional to personal. And finally, the explicit demand. If she wanted the career she'd been promised, she needed to be more than just an artist. She needed to be his. Cassandra was 19 by then. Still a teenager. Still dependent on Pappi for everything. Her apartment, her income, her access to the industry. And Pappi made it clear, without ever explicitly threatening her, that refusing him would mean losing everything. So she didn't refuse. For over a decade, Cassandra lived under Pappi's control. He dictated where she went, who she spoke to, what she wore, who she could date. When she tried to develop relationships outside of Pappi's orbit, he sabotaged them. When she showed interest in other men, he retaliated. The most documented incident involved Scott "Kid" Cloud, a rapper Cassandra had grown close to during a studio session. They'd exchanged numbers, texted occasionally, developed what seemed like a genuine friendship that might have become something more. Pappi found out. According to testimony from Capricorn Clark, one of Pappi's longtime associates, Pappi went ballistic. He called Kid Cloud directly and threatened him. When Kid Cloud didn't back off immediately, Pappi escalated. He allegedly used Capricorn as bait, bringing her to places where Kid Cloud would see her, then making it clear that if Cassandra didn't cut off contact, Capricorn would be hurt. The message was received. Kid Cloud distanced himself. Cassandra was devastated but not surprised. She'd seen this pattern before. Anyone who got too close to her faced consequences. Anyone who threatened Pappi's control disappeared from her life. This wasn't a relationship. It was captivity dressed up as love.
The narrative explores why victims like Cassandra Vale and Rodney Little Prod Pierce stayed silent for years. At 18, Cassandra entered what appeared to be a relationship with Pappi, but was actually a carefully constructed trap. He controlled her career access, isolated her from support systems, and used the classic abuser playbook of gifts mixed with intimidation. When she tried to leave, hotel footage shows him physically forcing her back, clear evidence of captivity, not consent. Rodney was lured with promises of career opportunities, then exploited for unpaid labor, allegedly drugged and violated at parties, and bound by NDAs that threatened financial destruction if he spoke out. Legal manipulation. Pappi didn't just hire lawyers. He employed fixers who prevented cases from ever reaching court. He bought silence through settlements with ironclad NDAs, then used lawfare to exhaust anyone who did sue, burying them in motions and discovery requests until they couldn't afford to continue. Media control. Through advertising dollars and industry connections, Pappi ensured negative stories were killed before publication. Journalists who wrote critically found themselves blacklisted, their careers destroyed as warnings to others. Institutional coercion. Artists signed to his label were forced to publicly defend him or face career destruction. Their statements of support weren't genuine. They were survival tactics from people equally trapped in his system. For 30 years, every institution that should have stopped Pappi instead protected him. Media outlets prioritized access and advertising revenue over truth. The legal system became a marketplace where wealth could purchase immunity. Law enforcement deferred to celebrity status. The music industry blacklisted victims, not abusers. 9 people died at his charity event. Devin Too Dark Williams was allegedly murdered on his orders. Sean Glimmer Matthew spent a decade in prison for Pappi's crime. Cassandra lost her youth to captivity. Rodney lost his sense of safety. Countless others carry permanent trauma. Pappi's arrest came not because the system worked, but because it finally broke under overwhelming evidence and public pressure. One woman's extraordinary courage, Cassandra filing her lawsuit, stopped him, not institutional justice functioning as designed. The document argues this isn't a satisfying ending, but an uncomfortable beginning, a call to believe victims unconditionally, stop worshiping wealth as virtue, reform enabling systems, support survivors' healing, and remain vigilant against future predators learning to be more careful rather than more ethical. Justice delayed for decades isn't justice, it's damage control. Real change requires confronting our collective complicity and rebuilding systems that protect people instead of power. Now the question is, what are we going to do with that? Don't just watch, subscribe. Help Mr. Sammy Stories hit 1,000 subscribers.